The morning I served breakfast. The whisper, the laughter, the door closing quietly behind me, and the moving truck that arrived 2 hours later. But what you don't know is that the truck wasn't emotional, it was planned. And my daughter-in-law had no idea who she had just humiliated. Before we begin, if you believe respect should never expire with age, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. I read every comment. Now let me tell you what really happened that morning. My name is Alina Morales. I'm 69 years old, a widow, a mother, and until recently a guest in my own home. That Tuesday started like any other. I woke up at 5:45 am before the sun like I always have. Habit from years of raising my son, Daniel Morales, and from decades of cooking breakfast for my late husband, Rafael Morales. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Rafael used to hum while shaving. The pipes used to creak when he ran the shower upstairs. Now the only sound in the mornings was the refrigerator's soft buzz and the distant traffic waking up. I tied my apron, the navy one with tiny stitched flowers Rafael once teased me about, and I began cooking. Pancakes from scratch, scrambled eggs with herbs, crisp bacon, fresh fruit arranged carefully. Coffee brewed slowly with cinnamon, not because anyone asked me to, because that kitchen is the last place that still feels like mine. At 7:30, Sabrina came downstairs. Sabrina Morales, my daughter-in-law, 38. Always dressed like someone might photograph her at any moment, she glanced at the table. "Oh good," she said, scrolling on her phone. "The girls will love this." The girls, her friends were coming over at 9. She had told me the night before in that sugary tone she uses when she needs something. "Mom Alina, we're hosting brunch tomorrow. Could you cook something simple?" Simple, I smiled and said of course. Because for 2 years I have been smiling and saying of course. Daniel came downstairs next. My son, 42, gentle, intelligent, avoids tension the way some people avoid storms. "Smells amazing, Mom," he said, kissing my cheek. That part was real. He has always loved my cooking, if only love alone protected you. At 8:55, the doorbell rang. 4 women walked in, all perfume and polished smiles. They complimented the house. "It's charming," one of them said. "Charming? This house is not charming. It was built with 30 years of sacrifice." But I smiled. I served plates. I poured coffee. I moved quietly between them like background music. They talked about vacations, schools, real estate investments. And then it happened. I was in the kitchen rinsing a bowl when I heard Sabrina's voice drop lower, conspiratorial. "She means well," she said, a pause. "But honestly, she can't even cook properly. I don't know how I put up with her sometimes." Laughter, not polite laughter, real laughter. The kind that lands in your chest like a stone. I stood very still. The water kept running over my hands. She continued. "She still thinks this house runs like it did in the 90s. It's exhausting." More laughter. I dried my hands carefully. I walked back into the dining room. They were mid-conversation when they saw me. Sabrina's smile didn't fade. She knew I heard. That was the point. I smiled. A calm, controlled smile I perfected after Raphael died. I collected the plates. One by one, no trembling, no tears, no confrontation. Daniel wasn't home. He had left for work an hour earlier. It was just me and the women who thought I was invisible. I cleared the table. Sabrina leaned back in her chair. "Thank you, Mom Alina," she said sweetly. "You're a lifesaver?" "A lifesaver," I nodded. Then I walked upstairs to my room. I closed the door quietly, and I stopped smiling. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed Raphael and I shared for 35 years. I looked at his photograph on the nightstand, and I heard his voice in my head. "Alina," he used to say, "never shrink yourself in your own house." I took a slow breath. What Sabrina didn't know, what Daniel didn't know, what none of those women laughing downstairs knew, was that this house has never belonged to anyone but me. Not Daniel, not Sabrina, not us. Me. Raphael made sure of that before he died. I opened my nightstand drawer. Inside was a small leather folder. Inside that folder, documents, legal protections, property deeds, trust papers, signed, notarized. Prepared by Victor Alvarez, the only man Raphael trusted with our affairs. I hadn't touched those papers in months. I had hoped I would never need to, but humiliation has a way of clearing fog from your mind. I picked up my phone. I scrolled to Victor's name. My finger hovered for a moment. I could ignore it. I could go back downstairs, keep cooking, keep smiling, keep pretending. Or I could remember who I was before I became convenient. I pressed call. Victor Alvarez speaking. Victor, I said calmly, it's Alina. A pause. Alina, is everything all right? No, I replied, but it's about to be. Silence on his end. I need you to come to the house today, I continued. And I need you to bring the file Raphael left with you. Another pause. Has something happened? He asked carefully. Yes, I said, but it's not what they think. What time? He asked. 11. I'll be there. I ended the call. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I stood up. I walked to my closet and changed into something structured, something dignified. Because if there's one thing I've learned at 69, it's that revenge is loud. But dignity is devastatingly quiet. I looked out the window. Sabrina and her friends were still laughing downstairs. They thought I had gone to my room to sulk, to nurse my wounded pride. They had no idea I had just scheduled the most important meeting of their lives. At 10:40 a.m., I heard the low rumble outside. Not Victor, something heavier. I walked to the window. A moving truck, white, clean, professional. Right on time. I had made that call yesterday, not this morning, because the truth is, this didn't begin with breakfast. Breakfast was simply the last straw, and Sabrina had no idea that when she whispered, she can't even cook properly, she had just activated a plan that had been waiting patiently for months. I adjusted my necklace, smoothed my dress, and walked downstairs. The laughter stopped when they saw my expression. Not angry, not hurt, composed. Sabrina tilted her head. Mom, Alina, what's going on? The doorbell rang, long, firm, official. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt completely at home. Because in the next 5 minutes, my daughter-in-law was about to realize something very important. She was never the lady of this house. She was a guest, and her time was up. When the doorbell rang, the laughter downstairs didn't just stop, it collapsed. Sabrina looked at me, confused but still slightly amused, as if this was a delivery she had forgotten about. Are you expecting someone, Mama Lena? She asked, her tone thinly sweet. Yes, I replied calmly. I am. I opened the door. Standing there was Victor Alvarez, exactly as I remembered him, gray suit, polished shoes, leather briefcase in hand. Behind him stood a young notary assistant and 2 uniformed civil officers. Victor met my eyes first. There was no pity there, only understanding. Good morning, Alina, he said warmly. Shall we? Yes, I stepped aside. Please come in. The sound of their shoes on the hardwood floors echoed louder than it should have. Authority always does. Inside the dining room, Sabrina and her friends had gone still. One of them whispered, Is everything okay? Sabrina forced a laugh. Probably paperwork. Paperwork? She had no idea. Victor placed his briefcase gently on the dining table, the same table Raphael and I bought on installment 32 years ago. He opened it slowly, methodically, like a surgeon preparing for something precise. Alina, he said formally, would you like me to explain or would you prefer to? I will, I replied. I walked to the head of the table. The seat Raphael used to take, I didn't sit, I stood. Sabrina, I began, my voice steady. You said this morning that you didn't know how you put up with me. Her face flushed immediately. That was just, we were joking? I don't joke about dignity, I said softly. Her friends looked increasingly uncomfortable. Victor removed a stack of documents and placed them in front of her. The top page bore my name. Alina Morales, sole property owner. What is this? Sabrina asked, though her hands were already trembling slightly. This, Victor said, is the official deed to this property, signed and registered in 1994. Sole ownership. Alina Morales, Sabrina blinked. But Daniel, I interrupted gently, has never been listed on the title. Silence. Her friends shifted in their seats. Victor continued. Additionally, Mrs. Morales has a living trust prepared by her late husband, Raphael Morales. It specifies that no transfer, modification, or shared ownership may occur without her direct, notarized consent. Sabrina's smile was gone. This is ridiculous, she snapped. We live here, we pay bills. You contribute to utilities, I corrected her. That does not make you an owner. The notary assistant stepped forward. Mrs. Sabrina Morales, she read formally, you are hereby given notice of revocation of residential permission. The words hung in the air. Revocation, permission, her friends gasped quietly. What? Sabrina's voice cracked. You can't be serious. I am, I replied. Victor slid another paper forward. 72-hour notice to vacate. Her hand flew to her mouth. You're throwing us out over a joke? No, I said calmly. Over a pattern. Her eyes sharpened. What pattern? I looked directly at her. The pattern of selling Raphael's tools from the garage without asking. Her breathing hitched. The pattern of removing family photographs from the walls. Her face went pale. The pattern of opening a real estate inquiry on this property last month. One of her friends whispered, Sabrina. Victor pulled out printed emails, screenshots, documentation. You contacted 2 brokers, he said evenly. You requested valuation reports, you asked about market timing. I was just curious, she shouted. Curiosity does not require discussing post-inheritance resale potential, Victor replied, reading directly from her email. Her friends were staring at her now. You said she didn't know how to cook, one of them muttered quietly. Sabrina looked trapped. Daniel knows about the valuation, she tried. Yes, I said. And Daniel believed it was for refinancing research, not preemptive liquidation? She froze. You told him it was about property taxes, I added. Her lips parted but no words came. That was the first crack. Then I delivered the second. I also discovered the document you asked Daniel to sign. Victor placed it on the table. A limited financial oversight form, framed as help, structured as access. Her face went white. You said it was for managing small maintenance payments, I continued. Victor tapped the clause. It includes discretionary asset consultation rights. Her friends were no longer pretending to be neutral. They were uncomfortable. Deeply uncomfortable. You were preparing, I said quietly, for a future that did not include my consent. I was planning ahead, she cried. You're almost 70? Yes, I said, and fully competent. Silence swallowed the room. Victor closed his folder. Mrs. Morales has chosen not to pursue legal action at this time for misrepresentation, he said calmly. However, if further interference occurs, she is prepared to escalate. Sabrina stood up abruptly. You're humiliating me in front of my friends? No, I replied. You did that yourself. Her friends began collecting their bags. This is between you two, one said quickly. Another avoided eye contact entirely. Within minutes, they were gone, the front door closed, now it was just us. Sabrina looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. You planned this, she whispered. Yes. For how long? I held her gaze. Long enough. The officers handed her the official notice. 72 hours. She stared at it like it might disappear. This is Daniel's home too. No, I said firmly. This is Daniel's childhood home. It is not his property. She laughed suddenly, brittle, unstable. You think he'll choose you over me? That question was sharp, but I didn't flinch. I don't need him to choose, I replied. I need him to see. She stepped closer. He won't forgive you for this, I smiled faintly. He doesn't need to. The moving truck outside shifted slightly. Its engine idled, reality was humming in the driveway. Sabrina grabbed her phone. I'm calling Daniel. Of course, I said calmly. I would expect you to. As she stormed upstairs to make the call, Victor turned to me. You're certain? He asked quietly. Yes. No hesitation, I exhaled slowly. There was hesitation, I admitted. For 2 years, he nodded once. Good. The officers left after confirming documentation. Victor lingered. When Daniel arrives, he said gently, this will either fracture permanently or reset everything. I know, I said. And are you prepared for both outcomes? I looked around my living room, at Raphael's portrait, at the light falling through the same windows I once washed with Daniel when he was 10. Yes, I replied. Victor closed his briefcase. I'll stay nearby, call if needed. He left. The house fell quiet again. Upstairs, I could hear Sabrina pacing, crying, angry, frantic. The truck engine cut off. That silence was louder than the rumble had been. 40 minutes later, Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. He stepped inside quickly, confusion all over his face. Mom, what's going on? Sabrina said. He stopped when he saw the papers still on the table. The official stamp. The signatures, the notice. He looked at me, not angry, not yet, just stunned. Is this real? He asked quietly. Yes, I said. Behind him, Sabrina descended the stairs slowly, her makeup smeared, her voice shaking. She's kicking us out, she said. Daniel looked between us. Mom, I met his eyes, and for the first time in years I did not soften. Yes, Daniel, I said calmly. I am. He swallowed hard. And in that moment, I knew something critical. The next thing he says will determine whether I lose my son or finally get him back. And what he said next changed everything. Daniel didn't speak immediately, and that silence. It was heavier than any argument Sabrina could have started. He looked at the papers again, then at me, then at her. "What exactly happened?" he asked quietly. Sabrina stepped forward first, of course she did. "She ambushed me," she said, voice shaking but sharp underneath. "She brought lawyers into the house like I'm some criminal in front of my friends. She's throwing us out over a joke." Daniel's eyes shifted to me. "Mom," I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. "I am not throwing you out over a joke," I said evenly. "I am ending something that has been building for 2 years." He frowned slightly. "Ending what?" "Disrespect," I replied. "Manipulation. And quiet planning." Sabrina let out a bitter laugh. "Planning? You're paranoid." I ignored her. "Daniel," I said gently but firmly, "did you know she contacted 2 brokers about valuing this house?" He blinked. "She told me it was about property taxes?" "Yes," I nodded. "That's what she told you?" I slid one of the printed emails toward him. He picked it up slowly. His eyes moved across the page, then stopped. He read the line again. "Once ownership transfers, resale timing will be critical to maximize profit." The color drained from his face. "Sabrina," he said quietly. She crossed her arms. "That's normal. People plan ahead. For after I die?" I asked calmly. The room went still. Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's not what she meant," Sabrina said quickly. "You're twisting it." I slid another document forward. "The oversight form," I said. "The one you signed?" He stared at it. "I thought that was for maintenance expenses," he said. "It includes asset consultation authority," I replied. His eyes widened slightly. "You told me it was minor paperwork," he said to Sabrina. "It is minor," she snapped. "You're overreacting?" "No," I said softly. "He's finally reacting." Daniel sat down slowly in one of the dining chairs. He looked tired, not angry yet, just unsettled. "Mom," he said carefully, "did you ever talk to me about feeling disrespected?" "Yes," I said, his eyes lifted. "Twice. You told me not to take things personally." Sabrina opened her mouth to interrupt. "Let him think," I said quietly. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. "Sabrina," he said slowly, "did you sell Dad's old drill set?" Her head snapped up. "That was junk, it was rusting." "It was my father's," Daniel replied. "You never used it, that's not the point." Silence stretched between them, and then I said the thing I had held back for months. "She called me in the way." Daniel looked up sharply. Sabrina froze. "That's not in this house," I continued calmly. "The house your father and I built, she said I was in the way." Daniel's breathing changed. It deepened. That was the first shift, not toward me but away from her. Sabrina sensed it immediately. "You're choosing her side?" she demanded. "I'm trying to understand," he said. "You're letting her control you," she pushed. "She's manipulating you emotionally." I let that accusation sit in the air, then I spoke quietly. "I am not asking him to choose." Daniel looked at me. "I am setting a boundary," I continued. "You are welcome in this home, but I will not live in my own house feeling tolerated." Sabrina scoffed. "So what, we just pack up and leave because you're sensitive?" Daniel stood up suddenly. "That's enough." Both of us looked at him. He turned toward Sabrina. "You humiliated her," he said. "It was a joke." "It wasn't," he replied. "It was a pattern." She stared at him as if he'd betrayed her. "You're taking her word over mine?" "I'm looking at evidence," he said quietly, gesturing toward the papers. That was the second shift, and Sabrina felt it like a crack in glass. "You think she won't leave this house to you eventually?" she said sharply. "You think she's not using this as leverage?" Daniel turned slowly toward me. For a second I saw the old question there, the fear, the inheritance. The unspoken assumption. I held his gaze. "When I die," I said calmly, "what happens to this house will be decided legally, not emotionally, not manipulatively." He swallowed. "That's not an answer," Sabrina pressed. "It is," I said. "Just not the one you want." Daniel looked between us again, then he said something I didn't expect. "Did you ever plan to put Mom in a nursing home?" The air left the room. Sabrina hesitated, just for a second. And that second was enough. "It was just an option," she said carefully, "in case her health declines." "My health?" I asked softly. "Or your patience?" Daniel stared at her. You told me that conversation was hypothetical, he said. It was. Then why is there a written quote? She froze because she hadn't known I'd seen that. Her silence answered him. Daniel took a step back from her, not dramatically, just enough. And sometimes that inch is louder than a scream. You didn't tell me everything, he said. You're overreacting? No, he replied, voice steadier now. I wasn't reacting at all before. That was the moment. The moment Victor had warned me about fracture or reset. Daniel looked at me again. Mom, he said quietly, why didn't you confront us sooner? I could have said pride or fear or exhaustion. Instead, I told him the truth. Because I kept hoping you would see it yourself. His eyes filled. That wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic, it was just human. I'm sorry, he said. Sabrina's head snapped toward him. You're apologizing to her? I'm apologizing for not paying attention. She laughed bitterly. So that's it. You're letting her kick us out? Daniel's jaw tightened. No, he said slowly. She's not kicking us out, she's reclaiming her home. The word reclaiming landed heavily. Sabrina's face hardened. If we leave, she said coldly, don't expect me to come back. Daniel looked at her, then at the stairs, then at me. I need time to think, he said. You have 72 hours, I replied gently. He nodded, not angrily. Not resentfully, just thoughtfully. Sabrina stormed upstairs, a door slammed. Daniel stayed standing there in the living room that once held his childhood, the room where Raphael had taught him how to ride a bike, the room where I had bandaged his knees. Did Dad really put legal protections in place? He asked quietly. Yes. For this, for you, I said, and for me. He nodded slowly. He always said dignity mattered more than comfort. Yes, I whispered. Daniel walked toward Raphael's framed photograph. He stood there for a long time. Then he turned back to me. I don't know what happens next, he said honestly. Neither do I replied. But I know one thing. What? I won't stay silent again. He studied me carefully, and for the first time in years, he wasn't looking at me like his aging mother. He was looking at me like a woman. A person, someone who had finally drawn a line. I'll figure this out, he said. Then he walked upstairs, not to comfort Sabrina, not to argue, but to think. And as I stood alone in my living room, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of losing the house, not of losing control, not even of losing my son, because for the first time in years, he wasn't being pulled. He was deciding. And what he decided in the next 72 hours would determine whether this house remained divided or finally became whole again. The house did not sleep that night. Not really. Doors opened and closed upstairs. Muted arguments rose, then dropped. Footsteps paced across the floorboards Raphael had installed with his own hands. I stayed in the living room, not waiting, just present. There is a difference. Around midnight, Daniel came downstairs alone. He looked exhausted, older, like something inside him had finally shifted out of denial and into awareness. Are you awake? He asked unnecessarily. Yes, he stood near the fireplace for a moment, staring at the framed photo of Raphael. I didn't know about the nursing home quote, he said quietly. I know. I didn't know she contacted brokers either. I know. He ran a hand through his hair. But I knew something was off. That was honest. And you chose peace, I said gently. He nodded. I thought staying neutral meant being fair. And now, he swallowed. Now I think staying neutral made me complicit. That word mattered. Complicit, not manipulated, not tricked. Complicit. Silence stretched between us, not tense, just real. Mom, he asked finally, if she hadn't said what she said at breakfast, would you still have done this? I didn't answer immediately. Yes, I said at last, but later. His eyes searched mine. So it wasn't about humiliation. It was about clarity. He absorbed that. Upstairs, a drawer slammed. Daniel exhaled slowly. She thinks you're trying to control me. I'm not, I said. I'm removing myself from being controlled. He nodded once. Then something in him hardened, not toward me, toward the truth. She asked me tonight, he said, if I would fight you legally. And what did you say? He met my eyes. I said I wouldn't fight my mother over something that was never mine. That was the first decisive sentence he'd spoken all day. I felt it settle inside me, not relief, recognition. Upstairs, footsteps moved again, then Sabrina's voice cut through the quiet, sharp, angry. You're really going to let her do this? Daniel didn't turn. I'm not letting her, he called back. It's her house. Not forever, Sabrina shot back. The words echoed down the stairwell. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, and in that small pause I knew he finally understood. This had never been about space, it had been about timing, inheritance, positioning, ownership before death. He turned toward the stairs. Sabrina, he said calmly, come down. She didn't respond at first, then she descended slowly. Her face was composed again, controlled, strategic. She had stopped crying, that told me everything. She looked at me, then at Daniel. So, she said coolly, what's the plan? We just surrender? Daniel inhaled slowly. We leave, he said. Her expression tightened. And go where? I'll rent something short-term. With what money? She snapped. You think your salary covers everything? He didn't flinch this time. Yes, he said. If we stop spending like we're already millionaires. That landed. Hard, she stared at him. You're turning on me. I'm facing reality, she laughed coldly. She's poisoning you. I stood up slowly. I don't need to poison anyone, I said evenly. The truth does that on its own. Her eyes flashed. You planned this for months. Yes, you waited. Yes, you humiliated me in front of my friends. You humiliated yourself in front of them. Silence. Daniel looked between us. I need both of you to stop, he said. We did. He stepped forward slightly. Sabrina, he said carefully, did you believe this house was going to be ours soon? She hesitated. Then, too honest in her frustration, she said, eventually, yes. How? When she passes, she replied bluntly. The room went very still. Daniel stared at her. That's what you were planning for, he asked quietly. It's practical. No, he said, it's premature. She crossed her arms defensively. You think she won't leave it to you? Daniel looked at me, and for the first time there was no expectation in his eyes, just uncertainty. I don't know, he admitted. Sabrina blinked. You don't know? He shook his head. I never asked. That mattered more than she realized. He had never asked, because somewhere deep down he hadn't felt entitled. She stepped back slightly. So what now? She demanded. Daniel exhaled slowly. Now we pack. She stared at him like she didn't recognize him. You're serious? Yes, she looked at me. You win. I shook my head. This was never a competition? It feels like one, she muttered. Daniel walked toward the staircase. I'll start gathering boxes, he said. Sabrina didn't move. When he disappeared upstairs, she turned to me again. You think he'll stay loyal to you forever? No, I said calmly. I think he'll grow. She studied me. You're not afraid of losing him? The question was quiet now, almost vulnerable. I admitted. And now I understand something. What? If keeping my son requires sacrificing my dignity, then I never really had him? That silenced her. For the first time since this began, she didn't have a response ready. She went upstairs slowly. The rest of the night was filled with the sound of drawers opening, closets clearing, suitcases unzipping. At one point, Daniel came down carrying a small box. He placed it gently on the coffee table. Inside were Raphael's old photo albums. I'm leaving these, he said softly. I nodded. Good. He hesitated. Mom, are you planning to change your will? There it was, the question he had never asked before. Yes, I said honestly. His shoulders stiffened slightly. Are you cutting me out? No, he exhaled, but I am restructuring it. How? I haven't decided yet. That was true, but I know this, I added. Whatever I leave behind will be a gift. Not an expectation? He absorbed that, then nodded slowly. That's fair. Fair, not owed, not guaranteed, fair, that was progress. Morning came quietly. Boxes lined the hallway, suitcases stood by the door. The moving truck returned at 10. This time there were no lawyers, no officers, just reality. Daniel carried most of the boxes himself. Sabrina moved quickly, efficiently. But she avoided looking at me. At the doorway, Daniel paused. He looked around the living room, at the couch where he'd fallen asleep during college breaks, at the dent in the baseboard from his childhood skateboard, at Raphael's photograph. I'm not angry, he said softly. I know, I'm ashamed. That can be useful, I replied gently. He nodded. I'll call you. I'll answer. Sabrina stepped outside first. Daniel lingered 1 second longer. Mom, yes, did Dad really think I'd need protection? I walked over to Raphael's portrait. He thought love makes people blind sometimes, I said. Daniel swallowed. Was he right? I looked at him carefully. Yes, he nodded slowly, then he stepped outside. The door closed, the truck engine started, and just like that, the house was mine again, but something else had changed too. Daniel had left, but not as a son cut off. As a son waking up. And what he does next, without Sabrina's voice in his ear, will determine whether this fracture becomes distance or transformation. Because sometimes separation doesn't end a family, it reveals who it really is. The first week after they left did not feel triumphant. It felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm has ripped through a house and taken what didn't belong but left the foundation standing. I woke up that Monday morning and stood in the hallway longer than necessary. No television humming downstairs, no sharp heels clicking across my floors, no tense air waiting for the next dismissive remark, just stillness. I walked into the living room and opened the curtains fully. Sunlight flooded the space Sabrina once called outdated. Dust floated in the air like tiny suspended memories. I didn't cry, not this time. Instead, I picked up Raphael's framed photograph and placed it back above the mantel, where it had always belonged before it was quietly moved to a side shelf for better aesthetics. I told you, I whispered to him softly. I wouldn't let it go, but peace does not erase consequences. 3 days later, Daniel called. Mom, can we talk? His voice was different, less defensive, less controlled. Yes, I replied calmly, not at the house. Of course not. The house now had boundaries. We met at a small cafe downtown, neutral territory, no memories in the walls. Daniel looked older than he had a week ago, not physically, emotionally. He sat across from me and folded his hands on the table like he used to when he was nervous as a boy. I filed, he said quietly. For divorce? I asked. He nodded once. She didn't fight it. I wasn't surprised. Sabrina didn't fight battles she knew she would lose, Daniel continued. I keep replaying everything in my head, the emails, the paperwork, the things she said, and the worst part isn't what she did. What is it? I asked gently. It's that I ignored you. That landed deeper than anything else. I thought keeping peace meant not choosing sides, he said. I told myself it wasn't that serious. I convinced myself you were just traditional, that she was just modern. I kept minimizing. He swallowed hard. But peace built on silence isn't peace, is it? No, I said quietly. It's avoidance. He nodded slowly. I let her talk about selling the house like it was inevitable. I let her discuss future inheritance planning as if you were already gone. I told myself it was hypothetical. He looked at me finally. I'm ashamed. There it was, not guilt forced by consequence, shame born from awareness. I took a slow breath. You are my son, I said carefully, and I raised you to be kind, but kindness without courage becomes weakness. He didn't argue, he didn't defend himself, he just listened. I don't want to be that man, he said. The man who watches and says nothing? Then don't be, I replied simply. We sat in silence for a moment, then he surprised me. I want to help you fix everything. You don't owe me repairs. I know, he said. I owe you effort? That mattered. We started small. The following Saturday, Daniel came to the house with work gloves and a toolbox. The garage had been neglected, Raphael's tools rearranged, some missing, some tossed into random drawers. Daniel stood there quietly holding one of his father's old wrenches. She sold some of these online, he said quietly. I know. I already tracked down 2 buyers, he added. I offered to buy them back. That was new, not excuses. Action. We spent the afternoon reorganizing shelves, cleaning surfaces, restoring order. At one point he paused. Mom, why didn't you say something earlier? I leaned against the workbench. I did, I said softly. Just not loudly, he frowned. I made comments, small corrections. I asked questions about where things went, but you dismissed them. He closed his eyes briefly. I thought you were just adjusting to change. I was adjusting to being erased. That hit him. Hard, he set the wrench down slowly. I never saw it like that. That's because it wasn't happening to you, he nodded, and that's on me. We worked until sunset. When he left that evening, he hesitated at the door. Can I still come on Sundays? He asked quietly. Yes, I replied, but not as a resident, as a guest. His expression shifted, not hurt. Understanding that boundary would remain. Weeks passed. The divorce finalized quickly. Sabrina moved into a high-rise apartment in another part of the city. Word travels quietly in social circles. I heard through neighbors that her image took a hit after the legal notices became public record. I did not celebrate that, I did not gloat. Consequences do not require applause. One evening, Victor Alvarez came by for tea. "You handled it well," he said, reviewing final paperwork at my dining table. "I handled it late," I corrected. He gave me a knowing look. "Late is still handled." He closed his briefcase and leaned back slightly. "Most people in your position choose silence. You chose structure." "I chose survival," I said. He smiled faintly. "No," he corrected gently. "You chose authority." That word stayed with me long after he left. Authority, not over others, over myself. Daniel kept coming on Sundays. The first few visits were cautious. Careful conversations, measured tone, like we were rebuilding a bridge plank by plank. One afternoon, as we were trimming the rose bushes Raphael had planted years ago, Daniel spoke again. "I started therapy," he said casually. I raised an eyebrow. "Good." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "You're not surprised?" "No," I replied. "You're not weak, you're learning." He clipped a stem carefully. "My therapist asked me something last week. She asked, 'Why were you more afraid of disappointing your wife than hurting your mother?'" I stayed silent. "I didn't have an answer," he admitted. "But you do now?" I asked. "Yes." He looked at the garden. "Because I thought you would never leave. I thought you'd always forgive me. I thought you were unshakable." There it was, the assumption many children make about strong parents, that strength equals infinite tolerance. "I am strong," I said calmly. "But I am not immovable." He nodded slowly. "And now I know." Months later, something unexpected happened. Daniel met someone. Her name was Isabel. She was not flashy, not performative. She came to the house for dinner one Sunday and stood at the door respectfully. "Mrs. Morales," she said warmly. "Elena," I corrected gently. She smiled. "Thank you for having me." That alone told me enough. She asked about Raphael. She listened. She complimented the house not for its value but for its warmth. Sabrina once measured rooms in square footage. Isabel noticed the way sunlight hit the dining table at 4 in the afternoon. Different women. Different intentions. After dinner, Daniel lingered in the kitchen while Isabel helped me dry dishes. "You cook beautifully," she said sincerely. "I've had practice," I replied with a soft smile. Daniel watched the interaction carefully. Hopeful. Cautious, he had learned that mattered more than anything. That night after they left, I walked through the house one more time. The air felt settled, balanced, not tense, not fragile, strong. I paused in the hallway and looked at Raphael's portrait again. "We did it," I said quietly. "Not just the eviction, not just the legal victory. We did the harder thing. We rebuilt something that almost broke. And here is the truth no one talks about. Throwing someone out of your house is not the hardest part. Standing firm when your own child questions you, that is harder. Choosing dignity over comfort, that is harder. Letting your son fall so he can stand differently, that is hardest of all. But here's what I learned. If you protect your peace with clarity instead of anger, if you act with structure instead of emotion, if you choose boundaries without cruelty, you don't lose your family. You redefine it, and Daniel, he didn't choose between me and Sabrina, he chose himself, and that changed everything. But what happened 6 months later, the decision I made about the house itself surprised even Victor. Because protecting something is different from deciding what to do with it next. And that decision would reshape our future again. 6 months after Sabrina left, the house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a decision waiting to be made. I didn't notice it at first, it was subtle. A shift in the way I walked through the hallway, a pause when I passed Daniel's old bedroom. The way I lingered in the kitchen longer than necessary, hands resting on the counter Raphael and I had installed together 30 years ago. The house was whole again, but it was also large, too large for one person. I sat at the dining table one afternoon with a cup of tea and stared at the grain of the wood. For years, I had fought to protect this house. But protection and possession are not the same thing, and that realization unsettled me. That Sunday, Daniel came by as usual. He brought fresh bread. Isabel had baked it. "She insists you critique it honestly," he said with a small smile. "I always do," I replied. We ate quietly for a while. The air between us was no longer tense. It was steady, repaired. Halfway through the meal, I said something I hadn't planned. "I'm considering selling the house." Daniel froze, not angry, not panicked, just startled. "Because of what happened?" he asked carefully. No, I said calmly, because of what didn't. He waited. I defended this house like it was oxygen, I continued. But oxygen is meant to move, not be trapped. Daniel frowned slightly. I don't understand. I built this home with your father, I said. We filled it with years, but it was never meant to be a monument, it was meant to be lived in. He sat back slowly. You think it's too big? It is too full of memory to be empty. That landed differently. He looked around the dining room. You'd leave it? He asked quietly. I would choose differently, I corrected. Daniel was silent for a long moment. I won't lie, he admitted. Part of me feels protective over it, not for ownership, just nostalgia. I know, I said softly, but nostalgia cannot be the only reason something exists. He studied me. Is this about not wanting me to ever think of it as inheritance? I held his gaze. Yes, that surprised him. I don't want this house to be something you wait for, I said plainly. I don't want you to subconsciously build a future around my absence. He swallowed. I know you didn't consciously, I interrupted gently, but life has a way of planting expectations quietly. He looked down at his hands. So what are you thinking? I don't know yet. But I did. Later that week, I called Victor Alvarez. He arrived the following Thursday afternoon, briefcase in hand as always. You sound contemplative, he said after I explained my thoughts. I am. He sat across from me at the dining table. Are you asking for financial advice? He asked. No, I replied. I'm asking for clarity. Victor nodded once. You have options, he said calmly. You could sell and downsize. You could place it in a charitable trust. You could convert it into something that reflects your values instead of your history. That last phrase stayed with me. Reflect your values. Not your past. What would Raphael say? Victor asked gently. I smiled faintly. He'd say not to cling to something just because we worked hard for it. Victor leaned back slightly. Then perhaps the house has served its purpose. That night I walked through every room slowly. Daniel's childhood bedroom, the hallway where he learned to ride a small bicycle indoors when it rained, the kitchen where Raphael once burned pancakes because he insisted on trying, the garage where arguments turned into laughter. The house had been many things, but it had never been about resale value. It had always been about dignity. And dignity is portable. The next Sunday I told Daniel my decision. I'm not selling it for profit, I said clearly. He looked cautious. I'm converting it. To what? A community kitchen and workshop. His eyebrows rose. For widows, I added. For women starting over, for anyone who needs a place to rebuild something with their hands. Daniel stared at me. You're serious? Yes, you'd open the house, I'd transform it. He let out a slow breath. That's not what I expected. I know, he studied my face. Are you doing this to prove something? No, I said calmly. I'm doing it because I almost lost myself protecting something that was never meant to cage me. He absorbed that quietly. And where would you live? I smiled. There's a smaller property near the park, 2 bedrooms, enough space, less maintenance, more sunlight. You already looked. I've already made an offer. Daniel blinked. Mom, this isn't reaction, I said gently. It's direction. Silence filled the room. Then he surprised me. I'm proud of you. The words were simple, but they carried weight. You're not angry? I asked. No, he said slowly. I think I was holding onto the house because it felt like stability. But you're right. Stability isn't walls, it's values. That was growth, real growth. A week later, Victor finalized the legal framework. The house would transfer into a nonprofit trust under my direction while I remained active. After my time, it would continue serving its purpose. No inheritance battle, no speculative resale, no quiet expectation hanging over it. Daniel signed as witness, not beneficiary. That distinction mattered. The first day we opened the doors, 5 women came, 2 recently widowed, 1 divorced after 30 years, 1 single mother, 1 grandmother raising grandchildren alone. We cooked, we talked, we rebuilt. The kitchen filled with laughter that didn't feel forced. Purpose replaced memory. And the house, my house, felt alive again. That evening, Daniel stood in the doorway watching the women leave. You changed its story, he said softly. No, I corrected gently. I completed it. He nodded. You didn't let Sabrina define it. No, I said firmly. And I didn't let fear define me either. He looked at me carefully. Do you regret any of it? I thought about that, about the eviction, the confrontation, the fracture, the rebuilding. No, I said finally, because every hard decision brought clarity. Daniel smiled faintly. You're stronger than I thought? I was always strong, I replied. You just hadn't seen it yet. As the sun set behind the house that night, I stood in the living room one more time. The walls no longer felt heavy. They felt generous. And here is what most people don't understand. Winning isn't about keeping everything. Sometimes winning is about deciding what something becomes. I could have kept the house as proof. Proof that I wasn't erased. Proof that I had authority. Proof that I had won, but proof is loud, purpose is quiet, and purpose lasts longer. Daniel didn't lose a mother that year. He gained one he finally respected. And I didn't lose a house. I gave it something greater than inheritance. I gave it meaning. But what happened next, when Sabrina found out what I had done with the property, would test whether transformation truly changes everyone involved, or only the ones brave enough to grow. Sabrina found out on a Tuesday. I know the exact day because it was the first morning my cooking workshops were completely full. 8 women stood around my kitchen island, flour on their hands, notebooks open, laughter bouncing off the same walls that once held silence and tension. The air smelled like cinnamon and orange zest. Cooking, I told them as we rolled dough, is not about impressing people. It's about feeding them with intention. They nodded. Some were newly married, some divorced. One was a young nurse who said she never had a grandmother to teach her recipes, and I realized something quietly beautiful. The kitchen Sabrina mocked had become a classroom. The old woman who only knew how to cook now had a waiting list. That was the morning Sabrina pulled up outside the house. I didn't see her at first, but one of my students, Rosa, lowered her voice and said, "Mrs. Morales, there's a woman outside watching." I turned. There she was, standing beside her car, arms crossed, sunglasses on, staring at the house like it owed her something. I felt no fear, only clarity. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped outside. She didn't smile. "You turned my humiliation into a business?" she said flatly. "No," I replied calmly. "I turned my pain into purpose." Her jaw tightened. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said. "I'm healing." She laughed softly, bitter. "Daniel told me about your classes, about the waiting list, about the article." Ah, the article. A local lifestyle blog had written about me the week before. Widowed at 69, she reclaimed her home and built community through cooking. I hadn't asked for it. But someone from the neighborhood had recommended me. Sabrina looked at the house again. "This was supposed to be our future," she said. I tilted my head slightly. "Whose future?" She didn't answer. Instead, she said something I didn't expect. "Daniel moved his things out of storage." That caught my attention. "And he's not coming back." I studied her face carefully. There was anger there, but underneath it something fragile. "He filed for divorce," she added quietly. The word didn't surprise me, but the finality in her voice did. "And you?" I asked gently. "What about me? What will you do now?" For the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. "I had plans," she said. "We had plans?" "Yes," I replied. "You did." Silence stretched between us. "You could have just talked to me," she said suddenly, "instead of humiliating me." I met her gaze directly. "You humiliated yourself long before that morning?" She flinched. "You embarrassed me in front of your friends," I continued evenly. "You minimized me in my own home. You strategized behind my back." She swallowed. "That breakfast wasn't a trap," I said softly. "It was a mirror." Her eyes shimmered for a second, but she blinked it away. "You always acted so calm," she muttered. "I am calm." "No," she shook her head. "You're calculating." I allowed myself a small smile. "Experience teaches you to think ahead." She exhaled sharply. "I thought you were weak." "I know," the honesty startled her. "That was your mistake." We stood there in the driveway, not as enemies exactly, but as 2 women who had chosen different paths. "I didn't marry Daniel for the house," she said defensively. "Then why did you research market timing before I was even 70? I asked quietly. She had no answer. Instead, she said, "He's different now." "Yes," I nodded. "He is. He barely talks to me. That's what happens when illusion breaks." Her voice lowered. "He looks at me like he doesn't recognize me." I studied her carefully. "Do you recognize yourself?" That one landed. She didn't respond. Inside, I heard laughter again, my students, the life moving forward. Sabrina glanced toward the sound. You replaced me, she said. No, I corrected gently. I replaced silence. Another pause. Do you hate me? She asked suddenly. I considered that. No, she looked surprised. I don't hate you, but I don't trust you. That's the same thing. No, I said calmly. Hate burns. Distrust protects. A long moment passed between us. Finally, she asked, do you ever regret it? Regret what? Choosing yourself. I looked at my front door. At the sunlight hitting the windows, Raphael and I installed ourselves. At the rose bushes, Daniel and I replanted. At the sound of young women learning recipes inside. No, I said, not once. Her shoulders sagged slightly. I didn't think you'd actually do it, she admitted. Most people don't, I replied. She looked at me for a long time, as if trying to understand something that no longer fit her narrative. I'm not the villain, she said quietly. No one wakes up planning to be, I answered. But you crossed lines, she nodded faintly. I wanted security. So did I. I wanted comfort. So did I. I didn't think you'd fight. And I didn't think you'd push. Another silence, but this one felt different. Less combative, more reflective. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes looked tired. You're not what I thought, she said. No, I agreed. I'm not. She hesitated. Would you ever forgive me? Forgiveness, such a simple word. Such a complicated thing. I already did, I said quietly. Her eyes widened. But forgiveness, I continued, doesn't mean access. That one hurt her, I could see it. You won, she said. No, I replied calmly. I remembered, she exhaled slowly. Daniel said something last night. I waited. He said he grew up watching you build everything with Dad, and somewhere along the way he forgot what that meant. I swallowed gently. And now he says he doesn't want to forget again. A soft warmth moved through me. That's enough, I said. She looked at the house once more. I really did think this would be mine someday. It still might, I said evenly. She blinked. What? When I'm gone, it goes into a trust. For Daniel, yes. And you think he'll keep it? I know he will. How? Because now he understands what it costs. Silence again, but this time acceptance. She stepped back toward her car. I don't know who I am without all of it, she admitted quietly. Then maybe, I said gently, this is your chance to find out. She opened her door, paused, looked back one last time. You're stronger than I thought? No, I corrected softly. I just stopped pretending to be smaller. She got into the car and drove away. I watched until the car disappeared around the corner, then I went back inside. The women were waiting. Everything okay? Rosa asked. Yes, I said, tying my apron again. Just an old chapter closing. I picked up the dough again. Now, I smiled gently. Who remembers what I said about patience in baking? Hands went up. Laughter followed. Life continued. But as I kneaded the dough, I felt something settle deep in my chest. Not victory, not revenge. Resolution. Later that evening, Daniel called. She came by, didn't she? He asked. Yes, what did she say? That she didn't think I'd fight? He was quiet for a moment. I didn't either, he admitted. I know. I'm sorry, Mom, I know. Then he asked something softer. Are we okay? I looked around my living room, at Raphael's photo, at the restored bookshelf, at the steady ticking of his old watch. Yes, I said, we're better than okay. There was a pause. Then Daniel said something that made my throat tighten. I'm proud of you, not thank you, not I'm sorry, proud. And in that moment I realized something important. I hadn't just saved my house. I had saved my son from becoming a man who stood by while his mother disappeared. And as I turned off the kitchen lights that night, I understood one final truth. Sabrina thought she lost a house. Daniel thought he almost lost a home. But what we all almost lost was something far more dangerous. The truth would surface in a way none of us expected. The envelope Daniel brought that Thursday night was thin, too thin to carry anything good. He stood in the doorway of my kitchen, the same kitchen where Raphael once stood behind me, stealing olives from the cutting board while I pretended not to notice. Mom, Daniel said quietly, you need to read this. I dried my hands slowly on a towel, not because I was afraid, because I had learned the power of not rushing toward discomfort. I took the envelope. The return address was from an attorney I did not recognize, Sabrina's new lawyer. I opened it at the table. Daniel didn't sit, he waited. Inside was a formal notice. Sabrina was contesting the eviction. Not the ownership, Victor Alvarez had sealed that airtight. But she was claiming emotional distress, financial dependency, marital coercion. She was accusing Daniel of allowing his mother to destabilize their household. I let out a soft breath through my nose. She's not fighting for the house, Daniel said quickly. She knows she can't win that. She's trying to negotiate money, a settlement. How much? I asked calmly. Daniel hesitated. 200,000. The audacity almost made me laugh. Instead, I folded the letter carefully. She thinks I'll pay to make this go away, I said. Daniel's jaw tightened. I won't let her drag you through court. You don't control what she does, I replied gently, but you do control what you support. He nodded. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. There it was, not spoken in anger, not dramatic. Just clear, final. Are you certain? I asked. Yes, he exhaled slowly. She didn't marry me, Mom. She married the future version of this house. Silence settled between us, not heavy, not painful, just honest. Victor called the next morning. She's bluffing, he said without preamble. The claim won't hold, but she's trying to pressure you emotionally. I'm not emotional, I replied. I know, he said. That's what unsettles her? The hearing was set 3 weeks later, not a trial, a review, a formality. Sabrina arrived dressed perfectly, polished, controlled. But when her eyes met mine across the small courtroom, I saw something new. Uncertainty. Daniel did not sit beside her. He sat behind me. That was the only statement that mattered. Her attorney presented her claim, financial reliance, expectation of shared marital assets. Mrs. Morales created an environment where my client believed this property would eventually become shared family property. Victor didn't stand immediately. He waited. Then he walked forward with the same quiet confidence he had carried for decades. Belief, he said evenly, is not ownership. He presented Raphael's trust, the deed, the revocation notice. The documented email inquiries Sabrina had made about selling the house. Her lawyer faltered at that. Additionally, Victor continued, we have documented financial misrepresentation, which my client has generously chosen not to pursue criminally. The judge adjusted his glasses. And what is it you're seeking, Mrs. Morales? He asked me directly. I stood, calm. I am seeking peace, I said, and the right to live in the home I built without being treated as temporary inside it. The room was silent. The judge nodded once. This claim is dismissed. Just like that, no settlement, no negotiation, no payout. Sabrina's composure cracked. You ruined my life, she hissed at me in the hallway afterward. I looked at her, really looked. No, I said softly. You tried to build yours on something that was never yours. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply walked away from her. And this time, he didn't look back. The divorce finalized quietly 2 months later. No drama, no public scenes, just signatures. Sabrina moved out of state. Her name faded from this house like a bad season. But healing didn't happen in one dramatic victory. It happened slowly, in small, steady moments. Daniel came for Sunday dinners again, not because he had nowhere else to go, but because he wanted to be there. One evening, as we repainted the hallway together, he paused. Why didn't you fight sooner? He asked quietly. I dipped my brush into warm cream paint. Because I confused love with endurance, I said, and I thought keeping the peace meant shrinking. He absorbed that. I won't do that again, he said. I know, I replied. That was the last thing I needed from him, not apologies, not repayment. Growth. Spring came again, and this time we planted new roses in the garden, red, white, and one deep coral Raphael would have loved. Daniel dug the holes carefully. I remember Dad teaching me how to measure the spacing, he said. You used to get impatient, I teased. I still do, he smiled. But he measured twice anyway. Growth, that was the real inheritance, not the house, not the money, the wisdom, the line we refused to let be crossed again. A year later, I hosted a small dinner, not for friends of Sabrina's. For my own circle, women from church, neighbors, 2 young women from the cooking class I had started hosting on Wednesdays. Yes, cooking classes, in the same kitchen I was once mocked for. Mrs. Morales, one of the girls said while tasting the mole sauce, this is incredible. I smiled. I've been practicing for 45 years. Laughter filled the room, real laughter, not sharp, not mocking, warm, alive. After everyone left that night, I stood alone in the living room, Raphael's portrait back above the mantel. The floors polished, the air steady. I touched Henry's watch, no. Raphael's watch resting now in a small glass case on the shelf where it belonged. I kept it, I whispered, not just the house, not just the assets. I kept my dignity. Daniel stepped into the doorway quietly. You talking to Dad again? He asked gently. Always, I replied. He nodded. I'm grateful you didn't give up on me. I didn't, I said, but I did stop giving up on myself. That was the difference. And that was the last thing I reclaimed. Not the deed, not the furniture, not even the respect, myself. And when you reclaim yourself, everything else falls into place, because peace is not silence. Love is not surrender, and dignity. Dignity is non-negotiable. And if you ever find yourself standing in your own home feeling small, remember this. You built more than walls. You built a life. And no one, not even family, has the right to make you shrink inside it. And that was the final lesson this house taught me, the end.